Simoni Ohaituk glides his X-Acto knife down a sealskin hide, making sure it stays straight and about the width of a thumb.
And they culture it, they carved it to make very thin rope.
The rope, Ohaituk explains through a translator, is strong enough to make a harness for dogs, and even pull a bearded seal.
Heavy animal.
Ohaituk is demonstrating his technique to a group of young men and boys, as well as one special invited guest, Governor General Mary Simon, who is visiting the Inuit community of Inukjuak as part of her 5-day tour of her home region of Nunavik.
I asked him when and how and why they stopped making a sealskin rope and when, and his response is when we lost our dogs, that's when we stopped using it.
Over the dog slaughter?
Yeah, over the dog slaughter.
As explained in this documentary, Echo of the Last Howl, in the mid-1950s to the late 60s, a government-mandated dog slaughter was undertaken by the RCMP over supposed concerns of disease and population control. Inuit were not consulted before the slaughter, which decimated the traditional way of life here in the community of Inukjuak and elsewhere in Nunavik.
Those hard days when they really admire the dogs and live with the dogs, and when that was removed, the big chunk of their culture identity was removed.
Simon is visiting the Unak Men's Association, where this demonstration of how to make a sealskin rope is taking place.
I don't think there's any other better time to learn from the elders now, because as the elders are passing away, so is our history, so is their stories.
Since its inception in 2001, Unak's mission has been to provide a time and space for their elders to teach. The goal is not only to help boys and young men learn the skills to hunt, but also to instill a sense of pride and purpose.
We first started because there was a lot of social issues, first of all. A lot of unfortunate suicides, a lot of social issues. So we band together as men. First started off as a small men's group, and we just grew from there.
Once the hide is cut to a ribbon, Charlie Nakawak and Tommy Palliser stretch it from outside the door to nearly the other end of the building, about 9 meters total.
We have young men, young boys actually starting 9, 10 years old, and they've been with us for the few months that they've been with us. They've already learned how to butcher a caribou, how to hunt caribou.
Because of traumatic events such as the dog slaughter, residential schools, and colonization, the Inuit of Nunavik have been struggling with elevated levels of violence, substance abuse, and suicide for generations. Groups like Unak say preserving Inuit culture is part of the solution. And they're not the only ones.
Land's my therapy.
George Hokai is the land coordinator for the Iswassarvik Regional Recovery Center in Kuujjuaq. It's the only one of its kind in the 14 Nunavik communities. Currently, they only have 9 beds, for a population of about 13,000. But help is on the way. A new building under construction for 2023 will have rooms for 22 people at a time, not including space for their families if needed. Iswassarvik aims to treat addiction by addressing people's past trauma. For Hokai, that means bringing Inuit back out on the land. He says it works for him. He's now several years sober.
It's not like the South. I can't just schedule an appointment with a counselor here. When I need therapy, I just run off to the land and do my thing. Just go hunting and just have space to breathe rather than just dwell in society and just be all exhausted, So I go take off and do my thing out there, and it helps me to live another day, I guess. Yeah.
For Mary Simon, there's an Inuktitut phrase that sums up the ethos of programs like Iswassarvik and Unak.
Ayuinata, which means never to give up, no matter how difficult it is. I remember hearing this word when I was growing up, when people were challenged with different things. My grandmother was one of them that said that, and people used to say, Ayuinata, and it's a very important word in our culture.
Meanwhile, back in Inukjuak, the community of about 1,800 has recently seen the return of something long thought lost.
Before we didn't have any dog teams, for the longest time, for maybe 10, 15 years. Now we have 8 dog teams in our community, and these are young men growing with their dogs as well and providing for their community. Some are hunting with their dogs now.
Considering that an entire generation was traumatized when the husky population was wiped out decades ago, having a dog sled team now is an act of resilience and healing.
As much as we talk about the difficulties that communities are facing, there's also things that have happened that are good for the communities. And those aren't well discussed, those aren't well known, and we need to make sure that that's part of our conversation in Canada, is that Indigenous people are doing great things.
According to Palliser, those good things Simon refers to are starting to spread. And the last 2 years, 2 communities south of Inukjuak on the Hudson's Bay have created their own versions of Unak.
I think it's going to be important, for all the communities to develop their men's association so we can have a network to share our challenges, our issues, and also our ideas on how we can better support the young men.
As Mary Simon prepares to leave Nunavik once again for Rideau Hall, she can at least be confident of one thing. The concept of Inuit remains strong here. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Inukjuak, Nunavik.